Captain Sarah Chen gripped the stick of her A-10 Thunderbolt II as warning lights flashed across her cockpit. The massive twin engines of the Warthog hummed beneath her, their familiar vibration a comfort even as enemy contacts appeared on her radar. She had been flying patrol over the contested zone for 3 hours, watching for any sign of the alien forces that had been pushing deeper into human territory. The morning sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape below. What used to be fertile farmland now looked like a moonscape, scarred by weeks of fighting between human and alien forces. Sarah had seen this same devastation on a dozen worlds, but it never got easier. Each burned field represented families displaced, lives destroyed, futures stolen. Her radio crackled to life. "Hawkeye 6, this is Control. We're picking up multiple bogies approaching your position from the northwest. Recommend you return to base immediately." Sarah checked her instruments and spotted them on her scope. 6 contacts moving fast and in formation. She recognized the flight pattern immediately. Alien F-16s. The enemy had captured and reverse-engineered dozens of human aircraft early in the war, and now they flew them with deadly efficiency. It was unsettling to see humanity's own technology turned against them. "Control, this is Hawkeye 6, I see them. 6 F-16s in standard attack formation. Request permission to engage." "Negative, Hawkeye 6, you're outnumbered and outgunned. RTB immediately." Sarah gritted her teeth. The A-10 was built for ground attack, not air-to-air combat. Against 6 enemy fighters, she wouldn't stand a chance in a fair fight. But Sarah Chen had never been one to back down from a challenge, and the Warthog had a few tricks the aliens hadn't learned about yet. She pushed the throttles forward and dove toward the deck, using the terrain to mask her approach. The A-10 might not be fast, but it was tough as nails and could take punishment that would destroy any other aircraft. If she could get close enough to use the terrain to her advantage, she might be able to even the odds. The enemy fighters split into 2 groups trying to box her in. Sarah saw the trap developing and smiled grimly. She had been flying combat missions for 8 years, and her grandfather had taught her that sometimes the best defense was a good offense. She pulled up sharply and armed her GAU-8 cannon. The massive 30mm gun was designed to destroy tanks, but it worked just fine on aircraft too. As the first pair of F-16s swooped down on her, Sarah rolled inverted and opened fire. The distinctive sound of the Avenger cannon filled the cockpit as depleted uranium rounds streaked toward the enemy fighters. 1 F-16 disintegrated in a ball of fire. The second pilot, caught off guard by Sarah's aggressive maneuver, overshot and found himself in front of Sarah's guns. Another burst from the GAU-8 sent him spiraling toward the ground. 2 down, 4 to go, Sarah muttered, checking her 6. The remaining enemy fighters had regrouped and were coming at her from multiple directions. She pulled hard to the right, G-forces pressing her into her seat as she tried to keep the enemy fighters from getting a clean shot. A missile streaked past her canopy, close enough that she could see the alien markings on its side. Sarah rolled left and dove again, using every trick she had learned in 8 years of combat flying. The A-10 groaned under the stress, but the tough old bird held together. Another missile warning screamed in her headset. This one was closer, and Sarah knew she was running out of options. She pulled up sharply, trying to break the missile's lock, but it stayed with her. At the last second, she deployed chaff and flares, hoping to confuse the weapon's guidance system. The missile detonated just behind her left engine. Shrapnel tore through the Warthog's armored skin, and warning lights flooded her cockpit. The left engine died immediately, and hydraulic fluid began streaming from ruptured lines. Sarah fought to keep the aircraft under control as it started to roll to the left. "Mayday, mayday, this is Hawkeye 6. I'm hit and going down." "Repeat, I'm going down." The radio was filled with static. Either her communications equipment was damaged, or the aliens were jamming her frequencies. Either way, she was on her own. Sarah looked at her altimeter. 8,000 feet and falling fast. The A-10 was famous for its ability to fly home on one engine. But with hydraulic damage and control surfaces shot up, she was fighting a losing battle. She had maybe 2 minutes before she would have to eject. The remaining 4 F-16s circled like vultures, staying well clear of her guns but ready to finish her off if she tried anything heroic. Sarah respected their caution. They had just seen 2 of their squadron mates destroyed by a supposedly inferior ground attack aircraft. They weren't taking any chances. At 3,000 feet, Sarah made her decision. The A-10 was dying beneath her, but she still had one card to play. She aimed the crippled Warthog toward the largest concentration of enemy fighters and locked her stick in place. Then she reached for the ejection handle. "This is for all the good people you've killed," she said quietly and pulled the handle. The ejection seat fired her clear of the doomed aircraft, just as the A-10 exploded in a massive fireball. The blast wave from her own aircraft tumbled Sarah through the air, but her parachute deployed automatically and she found herself drifting down toward the hostile landscape below. Above her, the surviving alien fighters circled cautiously. They had won this engagement, but it had cost them dearly. As Sarah watched, one of the F-16s broke off from the formation and began a slow pass over the wreckage of her Warthog. She could see the pilot's helmet tracking her descent. Sarah looked down at the rocky terrain rushing up to meet her. She had survival gear, basic weapons, and 8 years of combat experience. The aliens might have shot down her aircraft, but Captain Sarah Chen was far from finished. In fact, the real fight was just beginning. Her boots hit the ground hard and she rolled to absorb the impact. All around her, the alien landscape stretched out in endless rocky hills and deep ravines. Somewhere in that maze of stone and shadow, she would make her stand, and when the enemy came looking for her, they would discover that bringing down the Warthog was the easy part. The hard part would be dealing with its pilot. Flight leader Kexthan of the Hegemony's 47th Fighter Squadron circled the burning wreckage of the human ground attack aircraft with growing unease. The twisted metal that had once been an A-10 Thunderbolt lay scattered across a rocky outcrop, still smoking from the explosion that had claimed it. But the cost of this victory sat heavy on his mind. 2 of his pilots were dead, shot down by a single human pilot flying what their intelligence reports claimed was an obsolete ground attack aircraft. The briefings had told them that A-10s were slow, ungainly machines designed only for attacking ground targets. They were supposed to be easy prey for modern fighters. The briefings had been wrong. Kexthan's scaled hands gripped the control stick of his captured F-16 as he studied the crash site below. The human pilot had ejected successfully and was somewhere in the rocky terrain, but that wasn't his immediate concern. Something about this engagement felt different, and his instincts told him there was more to the story. "Command, this is Blue Leader." He spoke into his communications system. "Target has been neutralized, but we sustained heavy casualties. 2 aircraft lost." The response came back immediately, tinged with the surprise that Kexthan expected. "Confirmed, Blue Leader. 2 losses against a single ground attack aircraft? Explain." The human pilot was, "Exceptional, Command. I recommend we investigate the wreckage thoroughly before proceeding with recovery operations." "Understood. Begin your inspection. Recovery teams are en route." Kexthan signaled his remaining wingmen to maintain their patrol while he descended for a closer look. As his F-16 swept low over the crash site, he could see debris spread over a wide area. The A-10's distinctive twin engines had separated from the fuselage, and the massive Gao-8 cannon that had destroyed 2 of his fighters lay bent and twisted among the rocks. But it was something else that caught his attention. A piece of the aircraft's tail section had survived the explosion relatively intact, and painted on its surface were the markings that identified every human military aircraft. The tail number. Kexthan brought his fighter around for another pass, activating his aircraft's cameras to record what he was seeing. The numbers and letters were partially obscured by burn damage, but they were still readable. 810981 Thunder Killer. The name meant nothing to him, but something about those numbers triggered a memory from his intelligence briefings. He had seen similar numbers before, in historical records captured from human databases, records that went back to their ancient wars before the hegemony had even made contact with their species. Blue 2, Blue 3, continue patrol. I'm uploading visual data to command for analysis. Kexthan transmitted the images and waited for a response. While he circled, he thought about the human pilot who had given them such a devastating fight. Most human pilots, when faced with overwhelming odds, would either flee or surrender. This one had chosen to attack. The communication system crackled to life with a priority message. "Blue Leader, this is Intelligence Command. We've analyzed your visual data. That tail number, we need you to confirm what you're seeing. I'm seeing tail number 810981 with the name Thunder Killer painted below it." There was a long pause. When the voice returned, it carried a tension that Kexthan had never heard from Intelligence Command before. "Blue Leader, you need to understand what you've just encountered. That tail number belongs to a human aircraft lineage that our Historical Analysis Division has been tracking. The numbers indicate a family connection to aircraft from their ancient global war." Kexthan felt his blood chill. The hegemony's intelligence services had spent years studying human military history, trying to understand their enemy's psychology. What they had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. Humans had a tradition of passing down military honors through family lines, creating dynasties of warriors that spanned generations. Explain, Command. The pilot you just shot down is likely a descendant of one of their most decorated warrior families. The original aircraft bearing similar numbers was flown by a human ace pilot who shot down over 50 enemy aircraft in their Second World War. That was over a century ago. But humans have a tradition of honoring their ancestors through naming conventions and number sequences. The implications hit Kexthan like a physical blow. He wasn't just dealing with a random human pilot. He was dealing with someone from a bloodline of killers, a family that had been perfecting the art of aerial warfare for generations. Command, are you telling me that this pilot comes from a line of their elite warriors? That's exactly what we're telling you, Blue Leader. And there's more. Our analysis suggests that the human military deliberately places descendants of famous pilots in similar aircraft types. It's part of their psychological warfare doctrine. They believe that genetics and training combine to create superior pilots. Kexthan looked down at the rocky terrain where the human pilot had landed. Somewhere in those hills and ravines a predator was waiting. Not just any predator, but one bred and trained from birth to kill his kind. Blue 2, Blue 3, form up on me. We're establishing a perimeter around the crash site. Sir? Came the confused response from Blue 2. It's just one human pilot. Shouldn't we wait for the recovery teams? That's not just any human pilot, Kexthan replied grimly. That's a ghost from their warrior past, and she's very much alive down there. As if to prove his point, one of the patrol drones that had been monitoring the area suddenly exploded in a ball of fire. On his tactical display, Kexthan could see the heat signature of a shoulder-fired missile rising from a concealed position in the rocks below. The human pilot wasn't just surviving. She was already fighting back. All units, this is Blue Leader. The target is armed and extremely dangerous. I'm recommending that we establish a 5-kilometer exclusion zone and wait for heavy ground support before attempting recovery. Confirmed, Blue Leader. New orders are coming down from High Command. This is now being classified as a Priority 1 situation. Kexthan understood. The hegemony's leadership recognized what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about capturing or killing one human pilot anymore. This was about stopping a legend before it could inspire others. But as another explosion erupted from the rocks below, taking out a second surveillance drone, Kexthan wondered if they were already too late. The name Thunder Killer wasn't just painted on the side of that A-10. It was apparently a hereditary title, passed down through generations of human warriors. And now that legacy was loose in their territory, armed and angry with nothing left to lose. The hunt was about to begin. In a bunker 300 kilometers behind the front lines, General Harrison Chen stared at the intelligence report that had just been placed on his desk. The words seemed to blur together as he read them again, hoping he had misunderstood something, but the facts were clear. His granddaughter's A-10 had been shot down over enemy territory, and the aliens now knew exactly who they were dealing with. The tail number 810981 Thunder Killer wasn't just a random designation. It was a legacy that stretched back 8 decades, to the Pacific skies of World War II, and a young fighter pilot named Lieutenant James Thunder Chen. Harrison walked to the wall of his office, where a faded photograph showed a grinning young man standing next to a P-51 Mustang. The same tail number was painted on that aircraft's side, along with 53 small rising sun symbols representing enemy aircraft destroyed. James Chen had been one of the most successful fighter aces in human history, and his legend had only grown with time. The irony was that Sarah didn't even know the full story. Harrison had made sure of that, wanting her to make her own way in the military without the weight of family expectations. She knew her great-grandfather had been a pilot in the old war, but she had no idea that she carried the genes and instincts of one of humanity's greatest aerial warriors. But the aliens were about to find out. Harrison activated his secure communication system and connected to the Historical Archives Division. Within minutes, he was reviewing files that most people would never see. Documents that traced the Chen family's military service across 4 generations. James Chen had started it all. Born in 1922 to Chinese immigrants, he had joined the Army Air Corps after Pearl Harbor and quickly distinguished himself as a natural pilot. But it wasn't just his skill that made him legendary. It was his tactical genius and his complete fearlessness in combat. The P-51 Mustang he flew bore the name Thunder Killer because of his favorite tactic. He would dive out of the sun, strike like lightning, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Japanese pilots learned to fear the distinctive roar of his Merlin engine, and many enemy formations would break and run at the first sign of his approach. James had survived the war and returned home to raise a family. His son Michael had followed him into military service, flying F-4 Phantoms over Vietnam. Michael's aircraft had carried the same tail number and the same deadly reputation. When Michael was shot down and captured in 1968, his Phantom's wreckage became a trophy for the North Vietnamese forces. But Michael had survived 18 months in captivity and returned home with his spirit unbroken. He had passed the warrior tradition to his own son, Harrison, who had flown F-15 Eagles during the Gulf War. And now the legacy had passed to Sarah, the fourth generation of Chen pilots to carry the Thunder Killer name into battle. Harrison closed the files and returned to the present crisis. Sarah was down in enemy territory, and the aliens now understood they were dealing with something more than just another human pilot. The question was whether they truly comprehended what that meant. He activated another communication channel, this one connecting him to the Office of Strategic Planning. "This is General Chen. I need to speak to Admiral Rodriguez immediately." The response came within seconds. "General, we've been expecting your call. We're already mobilizing assets for a rescue operation." "It's not that simple, Admiral. The aliens have identified Sarah's aircraft. They know about the tail number and what it represents. This has moved beyond a simple rescue mission." "Explain." Harrison pulled up a classified file on his screen. "The Chen family bloodline has been the subject of genetic and psychological studies for decades. What we've discovered is that certain traits related to spatial awareness, reaction time, and tactical thinking appear to be hereditary. Sarah carries genes that have been refined through 4 generations of aerial combat. You're talking about engineered pilots, not engineered, evolved. Natural selection in its most concentrated form. Every generation of my family has faced aerial combat and survived. The ones who lived to reproduce passed on their advantages to the next generation. Sarah represents the culmination of that process." There was a pause as the Admiral processed this information. "What are you saying, General?" "I'm saying that the aliens think they've trapped a single human pilot. What they've actually done is awaken something that their species has never encountered before. A perfect predator, designed by 80 years of warfare to hunt and kill in the skies." As if to emphasize his point, Harrison's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. It was from the Frontline Intelligence Unit monitoring alien communications. The message was brief but telling. "Enemy forces are pulling back from the crash site. They're requesting heavy reinforcements and orbital support." Harrison smiled grimly. Sarah was already making her presence felt. The Admiral's voice returned, now carrying a new tone of understanding. "What do you need from us, General?" "Time. Sarah doesn't know her full heritage, but her instincts will guide her. The Chen family has a saying, 'When thunder comes, even dragons flee.' The aliens are about to learn why." Harrison walked back to his grandfather's photograph. The young pilot in the picture had faced impossible odds against an enemy that outnumbered him 50-1. He had not only survived but had become a legend that inspired terror in his enemies. Now 8 decades later, his great-granddaughter was writing the next chapter of that legend. But this time the enemy wasn't flying Zeros or MiGs. This time, humanity faced an alien species with technology decades ahead of their own. The difference was that Sarah Chen carried something no alien technology could replicate: the accumulated wisdom and instincts of 4 generations of survivors. Every tactical lesson learned by her ancestors, every hard-won victory, every desperate escape from certain death had been passed down through genetics and family stories. The aliens had studied human military history. They understood human tactics and technology, but they had made one critical error. They had assumed that humans were just another species, governed by the same rules of logic and self-preservation that applied to every other intelligent race they had encountered. They were about to discover that the Chen family played by different rules. Rules written in blood across 4 generations of warfare. Rules that said sometimes the only way to survive was to become more dangerous than anything hunting you. Somewhere in the rocky wasteland of enemy territory, Sarah Chen was about to remember who she really was. And when that happened, the aliens would finally understand why humans had earned their reputation as the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. The Thunderkiller legacy wasn't just alive. It was about to remind the universe why some bloodlines were forged in fire and tempered in battle. The hunt was indeed about to begin, but the aliens were about to discover they weren't the hunters in this scenario. They were the prey. Sarah Chen crouched in the shadow of a rock formation, her survival knife gleaming in the alien sun as she finished setting her third improvised trap. The landscape around her was a maze of stone corridors and hidden caves, perfect for guerrilla warfare. She had been on the ground for 6 hours, and already the aliens were learning to fear the rocks that had seemed so empty and harmless. Her survival kit had yielded everything she needed to become a nightmare. Emergency flares could be rigged into proximity mines. Signal mirrors became targeting devices. Even her emergency rations had been repurposed. Their chemical heat packs turned into incendiary devices that could blind sensors and burn through light armor. But it wasn't the improvised weapons that made Sarah dangerous. It was something deeper, something that had been awakening in her mind since the moment her boots hit alien soil. Tactical knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. Battle instincts that felt older than her own memories. She moved through the rocks like a ghost, every step calculated to avoid detection, while setting up killing zones and escape routes. Without consciously realizing it, she was implementing tactics that her great-grandfather had used against Japanese forces in the Pacific, strategies that had been passed down through 4 generations of warriors. The aliens were adapting quickly, though. Sarah had to respect their professionalism. After losing 2 surveillance drones to her improvised missiles, they had pulled back to establish a perimeter. But they were coming. She could feel it in the way the aircraft circled overhead, in the careful pattern of their reconnaissance flights. Her radio, damaged in the ejection, crackled occasionally with fragments of alien communications. She couldn't understand their language, but the tone was unmistakable. They were coordinating something big. Sarah settled into a concealed position overlooking the main approach to her crash site and checked her equipment one more time. She had 4 more improvised explosive devices, 2 emergency flares rigged as flashbangs, her sidearm with 3 magazines, and her survival knife. Against a professional military force, it should have been laughably inadequate, but something in her mind whispered that it would be enough. More than enough. The first alien ground troops appeared 2 hours later. Sarah watched through her rifle scope as 12 figures in powered armor moved carefully through the rocks below her position. They were good, advancing in textbook formation with proper spacing and overlapping fields of fire. Their equipment was clearly superior to anything humanity could field. Sarah smiled coldly and activated her first trap. The explosion echoed through the canyon as her improvised mine detonated directly under the alien point man. The blast wasn't powerful enough to penetrate his armor completely, but it was enough to stagger him and trigger an automatic response from his squad. They immediately spread out and took defensive positions, exactly as Sarah had expected, exactly as the second trap required. The flashbang went off in the center of their defensive formation, overwhelming their visual sensors and communication systems. In the moment of confusion that followed, Sarah opened fire with her sidearm. Her shots weren't aimed to kill, at least not directly. Instead, she targeted their equipment, their weapons, their communication gear. 3 aliens went down with damaged weapon systems. 2 more lost their communication arrays. The squad's carefully coordinated advance dissolved into chaos as individual soldiers lost contact with their teammates and found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see. Sarah was already moving to her second position when the aliens regrouped. She had learned something important from that first engagement. Their armor was tough, but their electronics were vulnerable to electromagnetic pulse effects. And her emergency flares, when rigged properly, generated substantial EM radiation. The alien commander was clearly experienced. Instead of pursuing Sarah directly, he split his force and began a systematic search of the area. It was a sound tactical decision that would have worked against most enemies. But Sarah had inherited tactical instincts that had been refined through 4 generations of aerial combat, and those instincts translated perfectly to ground warfare. She hit them again an hour later, this time from 3 different positions in rapid succession. The aliens found themselves taking fire from multiple directions, unable to determine how many enemies they faced. In the confusion, Sarah managed to separate 2 soldiers from their squad and eliminate them with her knife, adding their weapons and equipment to her growing arsenal. The alien weapons were energy-based and clearly superior to human technology. but they required biometric locks that prevented Sarah from using them directly. However, their power cells could be harvested and turned into much more effective improvised explosives. By nightfall, Sarah had reduced the 12-man alien squad to 6 survivors, and those survivors were showing clear signs of psychological stress. Their precise military formation had devolved into a defensive cluster that moved hesitantly through terrain they no longer trusted. But Sarah knew that this was just the beginning. The aliens would bring in more troops, heavier weapons, perhaps even orbital support. She needed to escalate the situation before they could bring their technological advantages to bear. That night, she infiltrated their temporary base camp. The aliens had established a defensive perimeter using portable shield generators and automated sentry guns. Their camp was a textbook example of military engineering, positioned on high ground with excellent sight lines and multiple escape routes. Any conventional assault would have been suicide. Sarah didn't make a conventional assault. Instead, she spent 3 hours crawling through a drainage channel that the aliens had dismissed as too small for human infiltration. She emerged inside their perimeter just after midnight, when their biological rhythms would be at their lowest ebb. The sentry on duty never saw her coming. Sarah's knife took him silently, and she appropriated his communication gear before moving to her real target, their command vehicle. The aliens had made the mistake of using their most advanced technology to coordinate their hunt. Their command vehicle contained real-time intelligence feeds, tactical analysis systems, and direct communication links to their orbital support. It was the brain of their operation. Sarah turned it into a bomb. Using power cells from the alien weapons she had captured, Sarah rigged an explosive device that would not only destroy the command vehicle, but also send a feedback pulse through their communication network. When it detonated, every alien unit within 50 kilometers would lose communication and coordination simultaneously. She was halfway back to her escape route when the explosion lit up the night sky. The command vehicle disintegrated in a blast that could be seen from orbit, and immediately every alien communication channel dissolved into static. But Sarah wasn't finished. In the chaos that followed the explosion, she systematically eliminated the remaining members of the patrol squad. Without their technology advantage, without coordination, without the psychological security of their superior equipment, the individual alien soldiers proved to be no match for a human warrior operating on pure instinct and 4 generations of accumulated killing wisdom. By dawn, Sarah stood alone among the smoking ruins of the alien base camp. 12 elite soldiers and their support personnel had been reduced to scattered body parts and burning equipment. The hunters had become the hunted, and the hunt had ended in complete annihilation. Sarah activated the emergency beacon in the alien communication equipment, sending a message that would reach every alien unit in the system. She didn't speak their language, but the message would be clear enough when they found the wreckage. She had used their own communication gear to issue a challenge: send more. As she melted back into the rocks, Sarah felt something stirring in her memory. Fragments of stories her grandfather had told her, tales of aerial combat that had seemed like ancient history. But now those stories felt immediate, relevant, as if the tactical lessons they contained were part of her own experience. She was beginning to understand that she wasn't just Sarah Chen, downed pilot. She was the latest iteration of something much more dangerous, a predator specifically designed by evolution and family tradition to hunt and kill humanity's enemies, and the aliens were about to discover that bringing down her Warthog had been the easy part. Now, they had to deal with what crawled out of the wreckage. The first sign that everything was about to change came not from the sky, but from deep underground. Sarah felt it as a subtle vibration through the rock where she had taken shelter, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed familiar yet impossible. She pressed her ear to the stone and listened, her enhanced hearing picking up frequencies that most humans would miss. It was the sound of massive engines, but not alien technology. These were human drives, and they were coming from below. Sarah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The vibrations weren't coming from spacecraft approaching through the atmosphere. They were coming from beneath the planet's surface, from tunnels that shouldn't exist, from technology that officially didn't exist. Her thoughts were interrupted by a new sound from above. Not the whine of alien fighters or the thunder of orbital bombardment, but the distinctive roar of human aircraft engines. Engines she recognized but had never expected to hear in this contested system. The first ship to break through the cloud cover was impossible. Sarah stared in disbelief as a massive vessel descended toward her position, its hull gleaming with armor that seemed to bend light around itself. The design was clearly human, but it incorporated technology decades ahead of anything she had seen in official military briefings. The ship touched down in a clearing 200 meters from her position, and its cargo bay opened to reveal figures in powered armor that made the alien equipment look primitive by comparison. But what caught Sarah's attention wasn't their advanced gear. It was the insignia on their uniforms, the same lightning bolt and dragon symbol that was painted on her A-10's tail. The squad leader approached her position with confidence that suggested he knew exactly where she was hiding. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with extraordinary situations. "Captain Chen, I'm Colonel Marcus Rivera, 1st Special Operations Wing. We're here to extract you, but first we need to talk." Sarah emerged from her concealment, her weapon ready but not aimed. "Colonel, with respect, what the hell is that ship? And why does your unit carry my family's insignia?" Rivera removed his helmet, revealing a face marked by years of combat experience. "Because, Captain, your family doesn't just have a legacy of producing exceptional pilots. You've been part of something much larger from the very beginning." As if to emphasize his point, more ships began descending from orbit, not just transport vessels, but warships bristling with weapons that shouldn't exist, using propulsion technology that defied everything Sarah knew about human engineering capabilities. Dozens of ships, then hundreds, filling the sky with a fleet that had appeared from nowhere. The Chen family bloodline wasn't just tracked by our military, Captain. It was cultivated. Your great-grandfather James wasn't just a fighter ace. He was the first test subject in a program designed to create perfect warriors through selective breeding and genetic enhancement. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet, and not just metaphorically. The vibrations were growing stronger, and cracks were appearing in the rocky terrain around them. Something massive was rising from deep underground. "Every generation of your family has been carefully monitored and guided," Rivera continued. "The aircraft you flew, the missions you were assigned, even the enemies you faced were all part of a larger plan. We've been preparing for this war for 8 decades, and your family has been central to that preparation." A section of ground 50 meters away exploded upward as something emerged from the tunnels below. Sarah watched in amazement as a massive military facility rose from the earth, its surfaces covered in camouflage systems that had hidden it from alien sensors. This wasn't just a bunker, it was an entire underground city, complete with factories, training facilities, and what appeared to be a substantial military garrison. "How is this possible?" Sarah whispered. "Your great-grandfather encountered something during the war, Captain. Something that convinced him humanity would face a threat far greater than anything we had seen before. He spent the rest of his life preparing for that threat, and every generation since has continued his work." Rivera gestured toward the emerging facility. "What you're looking at is one of 12 underground complexes scattered across human space. We've been building this infrastructure for 80 years, developing technology that our enemies don't know exists, training soldiers who officially don't exist." Sarah's mind reeled as the implications sank in. "You're telling me that everything I know about the war, about humanity's capabilities, has been a lie?" "Not a lie. A cover story. The aliens have been fighting what they thought was the full extent of human military power. What they've actually been fighting is our training exercise." More ships were arriving now, some emerging from the underground facility, others dropping from orbit. Sarah could see the alien fleet that had been hunting her scrambling to respond to this sudden appearance of overwhelming force. But their response was confused, uncoordinated. They had no intelligence about these ships, no tactical data about their capabilities. "The aliens study their enemies carefully," Rivera explained. "They analyze military capabilities, technological limitations, strategic doctrines. They've been fighting a war based on intelligence that we deliberately fed them. They think they know everything about human warfare." An alien cruiser exploded in the upper atmosphere, destroyed by weapons that had fired from impossible range. Sarah watched through her binoculars as the enemy fleet that had seemed so powerful just hours before was systematically dismantled by human technology that operated on principles she didn't understand. "They were never fighting the real human military," Rivera continued. "They were fighting our public face, our conventional forces, our officially acknowledged technology. The real war is about to begin." Sarah looked around at the transformation taking place. The barren landscape that had seemed so empty was revealing itself to be an illusion. Hidden installations were emerging from concealment, bringing with them weapons platforms and defensive systems that turned the entire region into a fortress. Your escape and evasion exercise served multiple purposes, Rivera said with a slight smile. It allowed us to evaluate your inherited tactical abilities under stress, and it gave us the perfect excuse to reveal our true capabilities. The aliens now believe they're facing a rescue operation. What they're actually facing is the opening move of humanity's real war strategy. Sarah watched as squadrons of advanced fighters streaked overhead, their designs incorporating technology that seemed almost alien in its sophistication. But she could see human engineering principles in their construction, human tactical thinking in their deployment patterns. The Chen family genetics weren't just about creating better pilots, Rivera continued. They were about creating commanders who could think in 3 dimensions, who could process tactical information at superhuman speeds, who could make strategic decisions under impossible pressure. Every generation has been tested, trained, and prepared for this moment. A communication device on Rivera's armor chimed, and he listened to a brief message before turning back to Sarah. Captain, your grandfather sends his regards. He's currently aboard the command ship coordinating the fleet engagement. My grandfather? But he's retired. He runs a flying school in Montana. That's his cover story. General Harrison Chen has been the strategic commander of this operation since its inception. The flying school is actually one of our primary training facilities for enhanced pilots. The scope of the deception was staggering. Sarah realized that her entire life had been shaped by forces she had never suspected. Her career path, her assignments, even her choice of aircraft had all been carefully orchestrated to prepare her for this moment. But why me? Why now? Rivera's expression grew serious. Because the aliens made a critical error when they shot down your Warthog. They revealed that they had identified your family lineage, which meant they had access to intelligence sources we didn't know about. That forced us to accelerate our timeline. Another alien vessel exploded in the distance, its debris raining down on the hostile landscape. Sarah could see the enemy fleet beginning to retreat, but human ships were moving to intercept them. This wasn't just a rescue operation. It was a systematic destruction of every alien asset in the system. The aliens think they understand human psychology, Rivera explained. They believe we're motivated by the same survival instincts that drive their own species. They expect us to retreat when faced with superior force, to negotiate when faced with extinction. He gestured toward the ongoing battle above them. What they don't understand is that the Chen family represents something unique in human evolution. A bloodline that has been refined through generations of warfare to produce individuals who become more dangerous when cornered, more effective when outnumbered. Sarah felt something clicking into place in her mind, as if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed were suddenly fitting together. The tactical decisions she had made during her escape hadn't just been inspired improvisation. They had been the result of genetic programming that reached back 4 generations, enhanced by training she didn't remember receiving. You're telling me I'm some kind of engineered super soldier? Sarah Chen slid into the cockpit of the enhanced A-10 and felt her world change forever. The moment her hands touched the controls, systems she had never seen before came alive around her. But more than that, she felt her mind expanding, connecting with the aircraft in ways that defied everything she understood about human technology. The neural interface activated automatically, recognizing genetic markers that had been programmed into the system decades before her birth. Suddenly, the advanced A-10 wasn't just a machine she was piloting. It was an extension of her own body, responding to thoughts she hadn't yet formed, anticipating tactical decisions before her conscious mind made them. Neural link established, she heard herself saying, though she didn't remember learning that phrase. Thunderkiller is ready for combat. Through the tactical display, Sarah could see the alien response developing across the star system. Massive fleets were converging on their position, drawn by the destruction of the advance forces. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, Sarah felt a cold satisfaction settling into her mind. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should. The alien forces had fallen into the trap perfectly. In their eagerness to destroy what they believed was a desperate human rescue operation, they had committed their primary battle fleets to a single engagement. Every major alien commander, every elite unit, every advanced weapon system in 3 star systems was converging on what they thought was humanity's last stand. They were about to discover their mistake. Thunderkiller, This is command. You are cleared for immediate launch. Your target package includes the entire alien command structure. Sarah's grandfather's voice came through the communication system, and for the first time she could hear the steel beneath his grandfatherly tone. This was the voice of a man who had been planning this moment for 80 years, who had sacrificed everything to ensure that humanity would be ready for this war. Understood, Command. Thunderkiller is airborne. The enhanced A-10 lifted off with power that seemed impossible for its size. Sarah felt the aircraft's systems integrating with her nervous system, sharing tactical information directly with her brain. She could see every enemy ship in the system, understand their weapon capabilities, predict their movement patterns based on tactical algorithms that drew from centuries of human combat experience. But it wasn't just technology that made her deadly. As she climbed toward the alien fleet, Sarah felt her inherited instincts awakening fully for the first time. 4 generations of aerial combat experience flowed through her consciousness, tactical wisdom that had been passed down through genetics and family tradition. She was no longer just Sarah Chen. She was the culmination of the Thunderkiller legacy, armed with weapons that her great-grandfather could never have imagined, but employing tactics that he would have recognized instantly. The first alien interceptors came at her in standard formation, expecting to engage a desperate pilot in an obsolete ground attack aircraft. Instead, they encountered something that their tactical computers couldn't classify. Sarah's enhanced A-10 moved through space like a dancer, defying physics in ways that should have been impossible. Her weapon systems were equally impossible. The GAU-8 cannon had been replaced with something that fired projectiles at near light speed, each round capable of penetrating any known armor. But Sarah didn't rely on the cannon alone. The aircraft carried weapons that bent reality itself, creating gravitational anomalies that crushed enemy fighters like insects. 6 alien interceptors died in the first 30 seconds of engagement. Their pilots never understood what had killed them. All units, this is Thunderkiller. Beginning assault on the command ship. Sarah rolled toward the massive alien dreadnought that served as the fleet's command center. The ship was the size of a small city, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Its shields could deflect any conventional attack, and its armor could withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. Sarah smiled coldly and activated weapon systems that existed in theoretical physics textbooks, but had never been deployed in combat. The enhanced A-10 became a focal point for forces that warped space and time, turning the tiny aircraft into something far more dangerous than its size suggested. The alien dreadnought's shields collapsed under an assault that attacked the fundamental structure of reality itself. Its armor, designed to withstand conventional weapons, proved helpless against technology that operated outside the normal rules of physics. But the real devastation came from Sarah's tactical abilities. As she tore through the alien formation, she wasn't just destroying individual ships. She was dismantling their entire command structure with surgical precision. Every shot eliminated a key commander. Every attack destroyed critical communication nodes. The aliens had spent years studying human military doctrine, but they had studied the wrong humans. Sarah fought with instincts that reached back to aerial combat over the Pacific Ocean, enhanced by technology that had been developed in absolute secrecy for 8 decades. Command, Thunderkiller. The alien command structure is neutralized. Initiating Phase 2. Phase 2 was the revelation that broke the alien fleet's spirit completely. Across the star system, hidden human facilities revealed themselves simultaneously. Not just the underground complex where Sarah had been rescued, but dozens of installations that had been concealed for decades. The aliens found themselves facing not a single rescue operation, but the simultaneous activation of humanity's true military capability. Fleets of advanced warships emerged from concealment, armed with weapons that shouldn't exist, crewed by soldiers who had been training for this war since before most of the alien commanders were born. But the psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical assault. The aliens realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been a lie. Every victory they had celebrated, every strategic advantage they had gained, every piece of intelligence they had gathered had been carefully orchestrated by an enemy that had been playing a game. Several moves ahead, Sarah watched through her enhanced sensors as alien formations began to break apart. Some ships attempted to retreat, only to discover that human forces had surrounded the entire system. Others tried to surrender, but their communications were jammed by technology. that had been specifically designed to prevent coordinated responses. The alien fleet that had seemed so overwhelming just hours before was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had never really understood. And at the center of it all, a single pilot in an impossible aircraft carried out the tactical vision that had been refined through 4 generations of warriors. Thunder Killer, this is command. You are cleared to deliver the final message. Sarah understood immediately. This wasn't just about winning a single battle. This was about ending the war before it could spread to other star systems, before more lives could be lost on both sides. She opened communication channels that reached every surviving alien ship simultaneously. When she spoke, her words were transmitted across subspace frequencies that would carry her message to every alien world within 100 light-years. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Forces. Call sign Thunder Killer. Your fleets have been destroyed. Your command structure has been eliminated. Your intelligence about human capabilities has been proven false. She paused, letting the implications sink in. But this doesn't have to end in genocide. You made the mistake of thinking that humans are motivated by the same survival instincts that drive your species. You thought we would retreat when faced with superior force. Around her, the last alien ships were being systematically hunted down by human forces that had emerged from decades of concealment. But Sarah's message wasn't directed at the ships that were dying. It was directed at the alien worlds that were listening. What you failed to understand is that some human bloodlines become more dangerous when threatened, more effective when outnumbered. You shot down my aircraft thinking you were eliminating a single pilot. Instead, you awakened a legacy that has been preparing for this war for 80 years. The final alien command ship exploded in a burst of exotic radiation, its destruction marking the end of organized resistance in the system. But Sarah continued speaking, her words carrying across space to reach alien leaders who were just beginning to understand the scope of their miscalculation. This is what humanity does when we're truly threatened. This is what we become when our survival is at stake. You can choose to continue this war and face the full extent of what we're capable of. Or you can choose peace and learn to coexist with a species that you clearly underestimated. Sarah rolled her aircraft toward home, leaving behind a star system littered with the wreckage of alien ambitions. The war wasn't over, but it had been fundamentally changed. The aliens now understood that they weren't fighting a desperate species clinging to survival. They were fighting something much more dangerous, a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare, led by bloodlines that had been forged in the fires of countless conflicts. As she approached the landing bay of the human command ship, Sarah felt the weight of her heritage settling around her like armor. She was no longer just a pilot who had been shot down and rescued.